Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wide Awake News Radio. I am your host on this Wednesday, the 12th day of February, Charlie McGrath of WideAwakeNews.com. Of course, Wide Awake News Radio, here only on the Rinse Radio Network. Joining me here in just a minute is longtime co-host and friend and fellow YouTuber and all-around great guy, Warren Pollock, is going to be coming on to fill us in here. What's going on the East Coast, what's going on in the markets. And I just spoke to him briefly before the program. It sounds like we're going to be bouncing and hitting on a lot of different topics. But I wanted to cover a couple things first before we get down that road. I want to apologize for a repeat last week. I was at the International Builder Show in Las Vegas. We'll talk a little bit more about that with Warren in just a minute. But I did receive, first of all, I'm going to say this. I receive probably 100 emails that are positive or comments that are positive for every one that isn't positive, that is critical. And the ones that are critical, that I think are constructive criticism, I address, and the ones that are just, garbage, I ignore. But I did get one that was from a longtime listener of this program that I think was constructive criticism, and they had a legitimate beef, and it had to do with the lack of my presence on this program. And I want to just lay it out for those of you that might be new listeners or follow the YouTube channel and popped over here to check this out. There was a very long period of time where we were doing 2 hours a night. Warren was a part of that for a long time, coming on here every week with me. And I really do wish that I could be at a point where I could do this 2, 3, 4, or 5 hours a day. I would gladly sit here and do this, but to maintain a full-time job, and it isn't a job that's only 8 hours a day. It's a job that's 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and then a lot of travel on top of that. It's something that I have to do in order to put food on the table and a roof over my head. If I could make a living doing this, this is what you would see me doing. Now, if there is a tycoon out there that is absolutely butthurt because you're not getting enough of me on this program every week, listen, info@wideawakenews.com, send me a message. I will be glad to convert my living from what I do in my day job to this in an absolute heartbeat. But that pipe dream set aside, I need to do what I need to do, just like you do, just like everybody else listening. We all need to do what we need to do in order to put food on the table. So I apologize that you don't get enough of me on Wide Awake News Radio, but I feel that except for Friday now, which is an open spot, I feel that we have a really, really committed crew in Gary and Dinah and Eric and myself who are giving our time away and trying to do it in a way that is informative and entertaining every week for absolutely nothing. I mean, we do this as a labor of love. So please keep that in mind when you're listening to not just this program, but just about anybody in independent media that is doing this, or YouTube, like Warren does his YouTube videos and I do my YouTube videos. We're not doing this for money. I wish it were the case, but it isn't. We do it because we believe in what we're saying, or we believe in what we're doing. So if you wrote that email, you already know all of this because I answered you back. But if there's one person that wrote me an email, I have to assume there's many more that might be feeling that same way. Again, 100, probably more like 1,000 to 1, the positive emails, comments versus the constructive criticizing comments or emails. So keep the great ones coming, and have faith. The program has made it through thick and thin. The YouTube channel, the website, we've made it through trials and tribulations over the last 3 years that frankly surprised me, that including my health being in question for a little bit there, and other things hitting us that could have sank a endeavor like this if we were not so committed. So again, Gary, Dinah, Eric, myself, Bonnie, at the website, all of us are doing everything we can in order to try to continue this cause, and hopefully you think about that a little bit as you're listening to the program or listening to these other guests and hosts that we have come on here. All right, enough of that business. Let's there's stuff I want to get into. I did a video last night about And you know what, Warren Pollock, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. I'm going to get you on here because I know anything I talk about, you'll be able to give your 2 cents on. It's been a while since you and I have spoke. We've messaged back a little bit between Skype. I'm glad I could get you now because it sounds like you're about to tear off down to your Florida place. So welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. It's been too long.
Yeah, it has, Charlie. It's great to talk to you again, and we have a lot of things to talk about. I think if you were going to say things which are totally outrageous, you could probably make a living at what you're doing. But what you're doing is really talking to the points which are truthful in nature, and the common consciousness is so far away from the truth that that's a very abhorrent type of talking point that you have. In other words, if you were so off base that you wouldn't be a threat to the status quo, to the oligarchy, people would be flocking to you. But because you're talking against the true issues of today, you're not very high on the popularity list.
Yeah, no, you're.
And I think that's something to consider. I mean, there's plenty of people that are saying all sorts of outrageous stuff, and they're able to get huge following, but they're not speaking truthfully or constructively, and really they're providing a propaganda type of distraction to everything that needs to be talked about and acted upon today.
Yeah, you're right, 100%. I could not agree with that more. And you and I have talked previously. I've talked to Doug Owen about this as well. The more shocking a title, the more shocking a topic, the more views you're going to get, the more the more noise it's going to generate. But that isn't what this program's about, or what your channel or my channel is about. And it is unfortunate. Some people are just looking to be entertained. Again, this is something you and I've talked about for a long time. But it does, you know what? It all works out in the end. And what I mean by that is, I can, just sitting here right now, I can think of probably a dozen channels or individuals on YouTube or in independent media, on internet radio, that have come and gone primarily for that reason. First of all, they're grabbing, in some cases, Warren, they're grabbing your material. You know that's true. I know that's true. And using it as their own, but that's just it. If they're grabbing someone else's stuff, if they're just living on the hype of the moment, they're not long lived. They hang around for a little bit, and then they go to sell insurance somewhere else or something like that.
Correct. I mean, there's really, a lot of stuff going on. I mean, I know people are still thinking financially. If you want to talk about finance a little bit, we could do that.
Sure.
I think that the next trend that people are going to see is something called pension de-risking. Pension de-risking. And right now we're in a situation where every single pension plan requires 8% per year in order to stay solvent. And if you're working as, say, a school teacher in New York, the shortfall in being able to obtain 8% in the zero interest rate type of environment, the taxpayers pay for that difference. But if you're, let's say, a GM pension plan or a Verizon pension plan, or perhaps another, maybe CalPERS, which is another teacher's type of pension plan, you're going broke. Right now, the government policy has been to steal from savers. And the pool of savings, which is in pension plans, is there. It's an easy target for theft. And since it is the major amount of savings which is still remaining, it is a primary target of theft. And in pension de-risking, what it is, it's an action which is taken by a pension plan sponsor, let's say a corporation, illustratively, let's call it GM or Verizon, to reduce the plan's exposure to its liabilities. And what they do is they basically freeze pension benefits. They change the pension plan strategies. They offer lump sum buyouts. They say, okay, you can have this annuity from this insurance company. Instead of us paying you the money, this annuity will pay you the money. And of course, when you look at these annuities, there's a fraud on fraud on fraud.
Right.
So what the pension de-risking does, it's a way to basically steal from your pension. It makes the company that is de-risking look golden. It makes them look better to Wall Street. And it will make the average person that holds one of these pensions broke. And this is something similar to what's going on with MIRA, which is the government's program to corral people into government bonds. And they're going to say it's the first step in the government stealing pension plans. So the assault on the trend to assault pension plans is something which is operable. It's coming from many directions. On the private side, it's taking the form of pension de-risking. On the public side, it's looking to take your savings and pension plans and make the Treasury instruments the only instruments that are investable.
Mm-hmm.
And the government will safeguard your money. It's as good as gold. It's good faith and credit of the government. And that's a trend that you and I were talking about.
Yeah, in fact, we've been talking about that ever since this program has been in existence. And probably before we knew each other, we were talking about it during 2008, 2009, when this was first ran up the flagpole. You know, when they talked about these massive dives on the stock markets, of massive losses that were going on in individual IRAs or pension plans or investments in general, they floated this notion. I first remembered in 2009 talking about freezing the losses and basically taking the savings, replacing it with some kind of government promise, and it kind of just languished with that when they floated that trial balloon. But I'm with you. When Obama came talking about my RAs, I thought, yep, this is it. This is the grab for the $5 trillion in savings or in these retirement programs that is the remaining wealth of a diminishing middle class. So I'm glad to see that you and I are on the same page here.
Yeah, and it's a major part of the wealth that the middle class has. And it is a major liability or unfunded liability, both on the part of the government, but also on the part of publicly traded corporations. And when we look at things such as MF Global, we look at the GM restructuring. We're going to look at how Detroit is restructured. We look at the Verizon, actually General Motors and also Verizon have gone into de-risking. And this is something that is a trend which we saw years ago. Just takes a long time for the trend to sort of evolve. And right now, we have, from what I could see in the bond market, I took a look at some mortgage-backed securities. And from what I could tell is that the government has artificially priced all of the paper, it has been purchasing in order to buy time. And they've been able to inflate the stock market. They've been able to keep bonds from self-destructing. But but those days are I think frankly numbered. And as things continue to degrade financially, you're going to see that we're going to start to shift to war. And there's more indicators about some of the things that we talked about, which are coming into play. I mean, last time we were talking about the breakdown in the Middle East, North Africa area. And now we could see some major alliances starting to be cemented. For example, Pakistan and China are starting to develop jets, which they are going to co-manufacture. And the export of those jets are going to occur to other countries such as Saudi Arabia and Iran. And it's very likely that you're going to see Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and also China start to build an alliance. So the people that are going to be in conflict with that bloc most likely will be the United States and Japan and India as well. So you can start to see the fault lines of war start to form. And the war that's starting to form is nothing like World War I. And it's so interesting that someone will say something which gains a little traction in the news. Oh, this is a conflict which looks like World War I. And then you'll just hear a lot of people just parrot that on a verbatim basis.
Right.
Whoever's parroting something is totally and absolutely incorrect. The trends that are taking place are very long in their horizon. And I think that it's going to affect people in a way that is beyond the common experience or even the historic experience.
And, what do you think? I mean, I agree with you what you're saying, and we can get a little bit into what's happening in China. I guess my question there would be, they're certainly trying to garner allies in that region of the world. I mean, Africa, they're heavy into not just North Africa, but all of Africa. I think their commitment to the Middle East and building refineries and getting the resources out of there has been, well established and well proven. But do you still see, or I guess I'm going to have to pick my memory to see what your perspective was on this a while ago, but do you still see China's economy as, the elephant in the room? Because, for example, I was in Vegas at that IBS show here a week ago, and one of our Chinese partners was there, and he employs several hundred people. Actually, I think he's over 1,000 at this point. And in the conversation I had with him talking about the general economy, now he lives in a manufacturing area of China, and I said, what are the real unemployment numbers there? And he's telling me it's north of 20%.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's incredibly, when we were talking about China previously, you and I were always thinking that China was like one step away from revolution.
Right.
So what's happened is that I guess we turn the clock back to Ross Perot, and even before that, if we think about Kennedy and what was going on with steel, the United States started to allow its manufacturing base to be transferred to other countries. And that provided these countries with a way to sort of either build themselves up, which is the case with Chile, which is now more of a first world country, or at least the capital is becoming more first world than New York City. And we have those countries were able to build up on that kind of activity. China was able to come up from the dark ages, start to build its manufacturing base, start to build high-speed rail. But when you think about it, the growth that's occurred in China is not enough to satiate or to stabilize that nation. And I think what's going to happen is, as the economy turns down, and isn't it interesting that the economy's turned down in the emerging markets?
Yep.
At the extremities of empire. First it was the Middle East, North Africa, and then we see Europe maybe fading away a little bit, and now these shiny new emerging markets, guess what? They don't look so shiny anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But as the economy turns down, people are going to start to blame anyone but themselves. So we talk about responsibility. People don't take responsibility. So the Chinese are not going to take responsibility for the downturn. They're going to scapegoat. And in China, there's a YouTube producer called Clear as Vodka, and he's sort of a gold bug, and he does videos that hardly get any traction. But he actually goes by foot from place to place in China, shows you what the food's like, shows you what the newspapers look like, shows you the gold dealers. And when he's talking about the newspaper, every day they're talking about how evil Japan is, how they were brutal to the Chinese when they occupied Manchuria, how things are terrible in terms of the contested islands in the South China Sea. And then when you look at the Chinese passport, it has a whole different layout of what China considers to be China. And as the economy turns down, the people are going to be angry. They're going to be angry at the government. The government's going to say, look, it's not our fault, it's their fault. And they're going to start to, use the drumbeat of war to mask the instability. And I think that's something we're also going to see, with Turkey. Everyone right now says Turkey is a mess economically. It's a mess politically. But remember that Turkey up to now has been looking westward towards Europe. It's going to start to look eastward. And they're starting to talk to Persia. They're starting to talk to Iran. And guess what's in the middle? You have Syria sitting there sort of in the middle. And there's all sorts of different ways that this could play out. But I think when people think of war in the United States, they have a very hands-off type of feeling about it. It's something which is done far away. I mean, you were a soldier in Iraq. Was that correct? Or
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So what did you do? What was Iraq like before your experience in Iraq? Was it better than it was after your experience?
No. I mean, to bring us back to that point, you're 100% right. And it isn't just over a decade of war on terror. that has desensitized the population. It goes back. I mean, it goes back to even the Gulf War, right? As you mentioned, most people when I got back, they thought it was a video game. They were dropping some bombs, and there was really not a lot of death on either side, and it was pretty quick and easy and done and over with. Because it was a 100-hour ground war or somewhere around that time frame. But, people forget the over a month of bombing before and the hundreds of thousands of dead that were a result of that. So it was very horrific. But in most cases, if you asked when you came back, it was almost a bloodless event. And so the desensitization of the nation about war has been going on for over 2 decades. And I couldn't agree with that point more. We're going to be back with Warren Pollock and more Wide Awake News Radio right after. Okay, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath joined by Warren Edward Pollock. His YouTube channel is W.E. Pollock. It's W.E. Pollock on YouTube, right?
Correct, yep.
You still putting out videos quite often?
Not particularly often, maybe once a week or twice a week.
Yeah,
and
that's what I thought.
I've slowed it down. I've been doing some work with to sort of help out some hedge fund folks in Connecticut.
And I do want to get back into that, but I'll probably save that for the last segment just to catch up and see what you're doing. I do want to get back to your point. I didn't mean to cut you off, but these go quick. And you know what? Everybody would be doing well to take note of what Warren's predicting here, because of a lot of the things that we're talking about today, especially in Syria, especially in Turkey, especially in North Africa, this is things that nobody was talking about. That I remember, but other than Warren coming on a couple years ago saying that these things are going to come to be, and sure enough, they are. So when he's talking about what could come to this country next, you might want to listen, because he's got a very good track record. Again, like we said at the beginning of the program, it might not be titillating and sensational at the presenting it, but excuse me, but the long term is a very accurate record, so you might want to listen to what he's got going. But what we were talking about, Warren, is you were asking me that during the break, you kind of clarified it for me. Give the perspective of the people that were living in Iraq compared to the perspective of what the rest of the world, at least the United States, had on what war is all about.
Right. What I want you to do is take a before and after picture of the United States in your mind, okay? Mm-hmm. The before picture of the United States is the United States that you're living in today. That's the before picture, okay? Take the before picture, and then you impose a war on that country, and then you have an after picture, what the United States will look after the war. And I don't think it will be a nuclear war of any kind, but I do think what it's going to do is it's going to make people quite aware of how fragile the complexity of our society is. And I think that that 9/11 is going to be just totally and absolutely forgotten in magnitude compared to what's going to happen to the people of the United States.
9/11 every day. I mean,
9/11 every day, or 10 9/11s every day, or 100 9/11s every day, as was in the case of the Soviet Union potentially. Yeah. And if you don't have that kind of destruction that is visible, then what will be destroyed certainly is the integration, and that's all the stuff which is coming to you from around the world that you rely upon. You think you're a self-sufficient American. Well, you're living in just a fantasy land of your own making. You're living in a delusion. And the best way that we could draw an analogy is to take a parallax view or an outside view of Charlie's experience in Iraq, because there was a before picture for Iraq, and then there was an after picture for Iraq. The before picture of Iraq was before Charlie put his boots on the ground, and then, like Godzilla, Charlie went in there with his 500,000 friends and just tore the place to just. You tell me what it was like.
Well, and we talked a little bit about that in the break, and I think we have, maybe even a couple years ago talked about that experience. Iraq, there's a lot of kids listening right now that are 18, 20 years old that have never seen Iraq as anything other than a third world, broke down, dangerous place. But it was a very modern nation pre 1990. It had a very educated populace. It had very modern Western style infrastructure. It was a nation that and I'm not an apologist for Saddam Hussein or that regime. I'm just telling you the way it was. It was a nation like you would think you were plopped down in the middle of any town, USA. It had everything that we have here. And, even
like
during
sewage and water, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. Sewage, water, hospitals, schools, roads. I mean, infrastructure. It was a modern society. And, 60 days of bombing later, when we rolled into Iraq, it was barbarism. I mean, we had literally watched old men beating down women to steal an MRE because, we threw it off of the track. And you had craters in the streets and no running water, no sewage system, infrastructure destroyed. It completely, in a span of 2 months, they went from civilized society to barbarism, to cavemen, and that never ended. I mean, and Warren, I'll just end with this. What began then has continued into complete devastation of that region, especially Iraq, since then. And what we end up with today is a completely broke down Iraq where you can look at any given day where sectarian violence, because of destabilization, namely on our part, is killing 50, 90, 100 people every single day. So you take a before and after photograph, the after is horrifying compared to the before.
Right. And that's one possibility. I mean, the other possibility is that we just lose something called integration, which is how things fit together. So when I'm going down to Florida and I'm driving around just right across the peninsula from the West Coast to the East Coast, and I'm looking at all the orange groves, and guess what? They're all in a state of total and absolute disrepair. So you would expect to see functional orange groves. Well, where exactly are the oranges being grown? Well, they're not being grown in Florida because it costs too much to grow them in Florida. So they're being offshored the same way that we've offshored our manufacturing. That type of offshoring and additional complexity that's been added on to our society are two factors which make it very vulnerable to disruption and collapse. And that's also very likely. I mean, in a real war, we would see a loss of integration, and it would be devastating to the type of environment that people are used to having as a normal, everyday type of environment.
Yeah, no doubt. And now, do you see? And listen to you. I mean, you're almost describing. Do you see like a possibility for an invasion? I mean,
well, I think that if you invade it, you own it. I don't think that it's going to be an invasion. I think ultimately you'll probably see some sort of breakup of the nation, one way or the other. I think the back of the nation is going to be broken, and I think the people culturally, when you come down to it, are very diverse, and I think that they may be very similar in terms of the fast food places they go to, mm-hmm. but they're very dissimilar in some of the things which they value, and I could definitely see the U.S. being broken up along historic lines. I wouldn't be surprised to see part of the United States absorbed back into Mexico. I wouldn't be surprised to see a Northeast become totally independent with its own sensibilities. I wouldn't be surprised to see a South and maybe Central South United States emerge. But that's all part probably of the Reformation.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine if that kind of a breakup? And you know what? Others have predicted that in the past. I always forget his name, the Soviet KGB agent who predicted, or who said the ultimate end goal is going to be a breakup of the United States into several sub-states or sub-regions. But can you imagine if there was such a breakdown crisis that you've talked about for a long time that occurred that made us that vulnerable to the point where Mexico would lay claim to parts of Texas and California, but even China has said they have a right to the west coast of the United States that they had explored and been there first. So
It's interesting, that the Canadians just stopped, I think, 46,000 high wealth immigrants from patriating to Canada under a visa program. So you're looking at the Canadians trying to protect their own culture.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They think 30 million is a great plenty. They want to keep it the way it is. We're going to be back with Warren Pollock, more Wide Awake News Radio. Final break. We'll be right back. All right, guys, final segment on Wide Awake News Radio on this 12th day of February, Wednesday. Warren Edward Pollock, W. Pollock on YouTube, is our guest. We can continue on about the path moving forward. And I'll leave it up to you, Warren. I know you got a trip coming up. I know you've been working back in the financial sector for a while, right there in good old New York. So I always value your opinion on these topics. Yellen, our new Fed chairperson, looks like policy is going to be the exact same. Are we going to get another? I know you're surprised that we went this far without some kind of major financial calamity. And I know you're probably surprised, as a lot of people are, on the unbelievable measures that have been taken since 2008, completely obliterating any kind of a free market and putting all these Band-Aids on, which just amounts to more and more pain further down the road. What do you see? I mean, since you do spend your day working in the financial world, what do you see going on? Is it just going to be a continuation of Bernanke's policy and we're going to just keep racking up debt and pretending everything's getting better?
Well, I view the financial markets right now as just kabuki theater. I mean, it's a bunch of people just screaming on a stage in some sort of incomprehensible way and doing all sorts of bizarre dances. And actually, most of the financial industry has moved out to Stamford, Connecticut, and Greenwich.
Right. It's
not even there in Wall Street. And I'm just a few days a week or a month. I'm just spending time with some friends, looking at the way different businesses are working. And none of those businesses in the financial industries are accretive to the overall economy. But, you and I during the break talked about something which is very important. We talked about the fact that we are in a global economy and we've just sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul in the way that this economy has been structured. So when you look at the economy, a hiccup in the United States can cause ripples of terror to go all the way around the globe, as companies in China no longer can manufacture, as companies in Chile no longer have demand from China for resources that are ultimately delivered to our shores. The way that it works is just incredibly complex. And right now, the government has been very successful in using using theft and looting to delay the day of reckoning. But the day of reckoning has just been postponed. Nothing has been fixed. Not a single bank has been reorganized in a truthful manner. The derivatives which are outstanding have never been addressed. The bonds which are looking at the mortgage-backed securities, they would yield 5% if you bought them today. But really, to be risk adjusted, they would have to return 15 or 20%. So we are living in a world where nothing can find its proper valuation. And people ask the question, well, if government prints money, why can't they just print money instead of having taxes? And the answer is that it's not just government that prints money. It's the sum of economic activity that is sort of circulating around the globe. You use a credit card and you've created some money. You have a letter of credit between China and the United States. Guess what? You've created money. And that's something which people don't understand. I mean, that's why we have taxing authorities. They're creating money. They're pulling into their coffers money which has been created by other parties than themselves. And we're looking right now, I think, at the collapse of money. Some people see this as competing currency wars, but I don't think it. I think, frankly, it will just degenerate into eventually, a hot war and a loss of integration. You have countries which are becoming unglued. They're getting unglued from the extremities, the Middle East, North Africa, and then it's getting closer and closer and closer to the center of empire. And I think when Americans, have to do is start to look at themselves without the rose-colored glasses on. I mean, there's people internationally are as capable or more capable than people in the United States. They're certainly more hungry than people in the United States in terms of free press. I think there's just a statistic out that we're number 46 around the globe in terms of our freedom of press. So, we're looking at a society which is degenerated and is, very subject to a blind side.
Yeah.
And in that blind side, the reality catches out.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And it really, when you're saying that the people, there's other people around the world who can do it better and cheaper and faster and are more hungry. Man, I cannot agree with that more. And, you and I have talked about the sucking sound Ross Perot talked about so many years ago and the manufacturing base leaving this country. And we've turned into a service nation or a paper trading nation. And
and now it's also the agricultural base, which is left the country in part. And that's something to watch, with the droughts in California and elsewhere. But what exactly do we do? And, when I look at my peers in Stamford, Connecticut, I could just see them shuffle numbers around. It's not doing anything that is productive in the economy. And thankfully, I'm just working with these guys on sort of a part-time consultative basis. But, it just is a little hard to swallow, eating a fancy lunch and drinking lots of booze,
right,
with people that are doing nothing for the environment, for the country.
Yeah, except making $500,000 a year.
Well, not myself. I mean, I'm just doing working on a consulting basis. But the people that were making $500,000 a year are now making $200,000 a year. The people that were making $200,000 a year are now making $100,000 a year.
Yeah,
and I know some people in Greenwich, Connecticut, who have not paid their mortgage for 5 years, and they're just being evicted now.
Wow.
So they're sitting there in a multi-million-dollar house, and the house has never been foreclosed upon.
Because they didn't want to put it on the books. Yet we still see, and I think it's funny that I sit down and if I flick through the channels, you can start to see the reemergence or the resurgence rather of, flip this house Las Vegas, flip this house Los Angeles, and the zero interest rate, get it while it's hot type thing, and the nonstop solicitation for credit and or refi, and it's like, I made a quick video when I was at the IBS show. When I walked into the room that was booked for us at the Encore, which is just absolutely Steve Wynn, out of the world resort, every room in it's a suite, $300 a night, gorgeous, right? And I'm walking through there, and I'm like, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. Here we are, and the reason it hit me as insane is not because of the opulence of the Wynn. I mean, that's just that a lot of people want that, and more power to you. If you go on vacation, enjoy yourself. But the what's insane about it is the here we go again feeling that I had walking into that room, because I was going the next morning to the opening ceremonies of the largest building show in the world, and I knew I was going to be just hit with the propaganda and the hope and the we're back, here we go again type of thing.
Well, I think in Las Vegas, I was there pretty recently, and it was mostly hope.
Yeah,
there were a lot of international people that were there.
Sure. Because
it was an exotic destination. And when I look in Florida and also here in New York, the real estate has been, sort of propped up by international cash buyers.
Well, that's Vegas. I mean, if you're sitting at the part of the strip where the Wynn and the Encore are, you can look out your window and you could see a $2 billion, 70% complete resort casino that is sitting empty and has been for half a decade. You can look across the way where one of the famous ones they blew up, and there was videos of it. They started to build there, some of the cement works in. That stopped and has been shut down for almost 4 years. Now, there was an infusion of hope because the Chinese came in, and they're building now the largest casino in the world on that spot. And they're calling it the Great Wall. And so, yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, this infusion.
Right, and most of the, from what I could see, is most of the capital has been misallocated. For example, there's nowhere right now to put your money in a way that would provide value back. You can't go right now and build a factory in the United States and expect that it would be able to cover its costs. Even in China, if you were to put up a factory somewhere, odds are you probably couldn't find customers to sell your goods into. And that's the case today. It's something we talked about, where there maybe are 500 million real jobs against a labor pool of 2 billion people. It's just the way it is.
Right.
And it requires a total change of thinking in an unbiased way to really even understand the reality of that structural change. It's actually something that Karl Marx identified as being the ultimate destination of capitalism. When you mention that, people roll their eyes. Oh, Karl Marx. Oh, you're a communist. No. Listen to me very carefully. Karl Marx had a theory about labor value that proved to be correct over time. That's all I'm saying to you. That's it. That's all. And that's where we are today. And governments don't like to acknowledge that is the case. And in the United States right now, we have a situation where we are utterly and totally communistic in our approach, and whereby most of the jobs in our economy are either there because of cronyism or simply created out of thin air to keep people employed. Very few of the jobs in the United States are productive. Those jobs which are productive are very low-paying jobs, such as worker at Walmart. He's providing a function of some sort,
right?
Versus a guy at Wall Street who's highly paid. He's not providing a function at all.
Or somebody who's in the ever-expanding government role that is drawing now so much more than the private sector in earnings.
Or someone in the educational industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you notice, the government is tied itself into that. With all these loans, the first thing that you do to apply for college, after you've applied to a few colleges, you fill out a FAFSA form. Well, why is the government intimately involved in financing people's education? So that every single person, accepting aid or not, has to fill out one of these forms.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? That's what communism is about. And you'd certainly live in a communistic oligarchy under some sort of decentralized, unorganized, and pointless type of a system in terms of goal. There's the only 5-year plan that exists is that if I'm a president of a corporation in 5 years, I'll parachute out of it with 10 or 20 or $50 million or $100 million. There's no planning for anything. There's just looting. And that's pretty much where we are today. And the destination for having a totally unmanaged and unmanageable economy is destitution. And this is, most of the reality, most of the future relies in the unseen world. For example, we have...
Go ahead, finish up.
We have investment and divestment. People know what investment is, but they don't know what the trend is, and that trend is towards divestment.
All right, Warren Edward Pollock, W. Pollock on YouTube. Warren, great to talk to you again. I don't want to wait so long to get you on again. Enjoy your trip down to Florida.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Bye.
All right, guys, stay tuned for more great programming on the Rinse Radio Network. I will be back here next Wednesday at the same time. Please enjoy Eric Lovely tomorrow night at the same time. All right, guys, have a good night. We'll talk to you later. Peace.